I'd like to now move on to presenting the work of Alessia Borriello. Alessia is a master's student of classical philology at the Alma Mater Studiorum in the University of Bologna. And she has graduated with her bachelor's degree in classical literature with a thesis in Latin grammar supervised by Lucia Passetti and Danielle Tripaldi, which is most impressive. And then, as if that was not enough, a master's thesis in Greek philology in preparation. So please, I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about Sabrina, the chilling adventures of Sabrina, a wonderful topic. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. I wanted to begin by showing you the rudiments, so to say, of the world of contemporary fiction, because the product that I want to analyze is a web series, but it is itself an adaptation of something else. My topic will be the latent spells in the web series of Sabrina, a Netflix web series of 2018. So we always use the term remake, which is in general a refashioning with variations from an original fictional product, of which sequel is a subcategory, which is a continuation of a narrative containing the previous text. But what Sabrina exactly is a reboot. So this is a term borrowed from information technology, which is always in English. So reboot, restart. This is the dismissal of the continuity of a plot in which the characters experience a new life and are relocated in a different context according to the new needs of their time, which is in fact a dark time, as we have seen also with the Hunger Games. So we will see the dark shadows of this adaptation. An adaptation, on the other hand, is a displacement of a story among different semiotic registers, so a intersemiotic translation, in this case from comics to web series. So Sabrina has become, at all effects, a merchandise product, which has gone through a reification process in the technical vocabulary. So some Sabrinas over time, these are just some of them, because as I've said before, Sabrina is very popular. Her first appearance in a series entirely dedicated to her was in this series here, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, in the 70s. Before, she had appeared as a background character in the universe of Archie, but then she conquers her own comic series. Then we have animated series, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and in 2003, reboot. Other Sabrinas over time in the world of nonfiction, running from the 90s to 2003, we have Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which is, I think, the most popular, but correct me if I'm wrong. And then a series of 3 movies. I've selected 2 of them, which in turn have seen a great success and a great applause. This leads us to the decision of remaking Sabrina. This Sabrina is something different from the Sabrinas before. Rob Sheffield, a critical for the Rolling Stone 2018, has defined it a darker show for darker times. In fact, you can see already from the graphics that it has some dark accents. It is based on a coven of witches that rebel to Lucifer, basically. So what has taken a fancy to me was the language of the spells. The curses in Sabrina are obviously in English, because this is the original language of the web series, American English, but also in Latin. So we will now focus on the series, the web series, for the simple reason that the spells are longer and more extended, because as you can see in the comics, the word as a graphic substance. The spells are quite short and reduced into the balloons. So the space is reserved to the words. First things first, I asked myself how many were the spells and how many the Latin spells compared to the English ones. As you can see, the Latin spells have a steady growth through each series. You can see season 1, part 1, season 1, part 2, season 2, part 3. When I made this research, part 4 had not yet been released, but basing on the numbers, it seems to me to be enough for a linguistical analysis. And the Latin spells grow through the seasons too. Let's start with an argumentum ex silentio. So when is that the Latin spells are not used? The Latin spells are not used when I noticed there is a sort of cultural clash with modern magic. For example, this episode, part 1, episode 11, it's a special episode released for Christmas, and a modern ritual is performed, Yule log ritual from Wiccan magic. So as Professor Janka was saying before, probably what they needed was a specific vocabulary for that, which is not easy to be found in English. So in these cases, this is only an example. English is preferred, or the conjuration of a familiar, which is described in the comics in a encyclopedic way, as the typical animal that each witch requires. In this case, Salem. But another function, which is very interesting to me under a linguistical perspective, is what I call caption formulas. So when there is a crucial point in a narrative where a Latin spell occurs, the authors tend to repeat the spell in English, because obviously the audience is not supposed to know English. I found the clearest example of that in this necromancy ritual, where each Latin spell is it's a paraphrasis, let's say. So let's move on to the point, the spell themselves. I then proceeded with a qualitative analysis. So I tried to draw up a cataloging of the spells. I used the typology in Sabrina, so the typology they used in the School of the Witches, and then the cataloging for ancient magic, the cataloging of the modern scholars for ancient magic, but we will see them in depth. I won't read all of them because it would be too long. I selected only 2 of them, but only to render the quantity of them, I decided to draw up this table. These are only the first 3 parts, as I said. I tried to recognize the sources, so I tried to proceed in a philological way, let's say. So the first source I think I'm sure to have found is what I would call pop formulas. There is this sort of thick undergrowth of contemporary magical literature in Latin, which is to be found in the most peculiar places. So I asked myself which were the spells most likely to be spread over the internet. So the spells that were themselves repeated across the seasons. So like an heritage, so to say, collected by the authors. These are teleportation spells, protection spell, and block the passage formulas. Specifically, Lanuae Magicae, which I intend as Januae Magicae, so magic doors, because it is a teleportation spell. I found a plausible source for that because this game is previous to Sabrina. It is of 2015 in Ubisoft Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege. We have this exact spell, Januae Magicae. Then qui affecto protego, which I read quos affecto protego, I had a lot of fun in trying to decipher the spells because, as we will see better, there are a lot of diffraction linguistic mistakes. So whom I grasp, I protect, or whom I desire. I found this exact spell in two occurrences. The first the first of them is in a novel, a fantasy novel of 2016. So this one too previous to Sabrina, and a blog. And these are the sources, the video game and this novel, quite unknown, I would say. But what is even more interesting to me, because also modern scholars have sometimes questioned the existence of modern sorcery manuals. This is valid not only for magic, but also for other fields, for example, manuals for epigrammatic poetry and so on. But we have these in the modern magic, so modern sorcery manuals, and this same form, this same formula, qui affecto protego, I found it in this book, which is again under a philological perspective, interesting to mention because it's very easy to be found. So the authors, the putative authors, could just go to Amazon and find this book with Latin formulas. So now we have this this formula, which sounds Greek. Oops, sounds Greek to me, as we say in Italian. So not understandable. So this is only an intuitive translation that I gave. You ministers of hatred and destruction, and the keeper of discord, and you who do and carry on what proceeds at night, I summon you for this, to bring hatred to Sabrina. This is a curse pronounced by the Weird Sisters. And I found the model to be filled in with the victim's name, and these are the demons summoned, but it was too long for the narrative economy, so they cut it. This thing is more of an anthropological parallel, so I don't think I have time. Maybe we will go back to that in the end. But turning on to the linguistic discourse, the most interesting and also useful parallel that I found is that one of the fictiones, because I'm sure that somehow they have tapped into this reservoir, this pool, because there are sometimes verbatim cross-references with this word. So what are the fictiones for the non-insiders? They are the curses from the ancient world. About 1,600 curses come down to us, mostly found in tombs, because they were supposed to be delivered to the demons of the underworld, on lead sheets, or inscribed. They are of many types: agonistic, lawful, amatory, economic. About 600 of them are in Latin, so the Latin is on the Latin ones we will focus. I wanted to show you very quickly the modern cataloging of the fictiones. I followed mostly CROP 2008, because this helped me realize which types were most used. And I was not surprised when I found out that the invocation formulas with involvement of the recipient was the preferred type. Why is that so? Because as I said at the beginning, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina has a strong religious accent, because it is all about this coven of witches who rebel to Lucifer. So they often pray to Lucifer, to the to the kings of hell. So we have a sort of peculiar dark prayers, which is not unknown to the ancient world. Because as Northern has noticed at the beginning of the 20th century, magic has a strong link with prayer, which is itself deeply rooted into the Greek word for the Latins. So I want to look in depth two formulas, which are very different from one another. The first one is very brief. The second one is very long and rhetorically elaborated, but as rhetorically elaborated as filled with mistakes, which is interesting to me. So the first one, curse formula with direct addressing of the defixus. The defixus is the target of the curse. Abi malem cursem. So this is my my attempt at reconstructing it, but I'm open to any other suggestions if you have any, because I'm not a native speaker, so that's why what I thought about an English native speaker. I mean, so cursem is obviously a mistake. I think it comes from the confusion between Latin cursus, meaning curse, and English curse, which means malediction. Curse. So having curse, I think they just had the simple singular masculine ending of the accusative of the third declination, so cursem. This is a typical target language error from L1 to L2. There are many of them. They are very funny to me. We don't have the time to look at all of them, but this is a clear example, I think, of how it works. And then the whole expression abi malem cursem. I didn't find any references in ancient defictiones. So I looked into the English idioms. I found to be in a bad course, which means to be in a bad situation, in a difficulty, which could have become to go in a bad course and abi in malem cursem. This process, if we would want to locate it into space, I think that they could have put the starting sentence in a translating platform like Google Translate or DeepL Translate. This is not so evident here, but in other instances, I was pretty sure that they had used something like Google Translate or DeepL Translate, which are modern tools nowadays, through which it is quite simple to translate from and into Latin. Which type of Latin, that's another discourse. And one of my favorite formulas, I wrote it down into cola to render the the phonetic filigree behind it, the phonetic texture and the sought after language of this spell. I will try to read it. So this is an imitation formula with involvement of the recipient. Ater ignis fusque fume, evoco ut potentiam tuam monstres, cupidibus flammis hic veni, caelo subisto hanc arborem consuma, lucem tenebrasque tuas monstra, impetum tuum evoco ad devorandum hanc arborem, ac omnes hospitas devora. So black fire, murky smoke, I summon thee to show thy power. Come here in fiery flames, consume this tree under the sky, show your light and your shadows, I invoke your heat to devour this tree and all the refugees. This is a very important spell, actually, because it is located at the end of the first season. This is where Sabrina proves herself, defeating the 13 witches of Greendale. She summons, as you can see, hellfire. And this again has the typical stylistic features of a prayer, so invitation formula with involvement of the recipient. We have the evocatio to the hellfire, ater ignis fusque fumet evoco. We will see that this verb is completely familiar to ancient prayer and ancient magic. And then the praecatio itself, with a variatio between imperative, hic veni, ut plus subjunctive, ut monstres, and ad plus gerundive, ad devorandum. Ater ignis. So I tried to dig into this Latin to find plausible sources for that, because it was at a first glance already quite elaborate. So ater ignis is a poetic junctura that we already find in Virgil, and ater is not an adjective chosen by chance, because it is typically associated with the underworld, in opposition to niger, which means brilliant black. So this is quite a sought after choice, I would say. And then cupidibus. I have to admit that what wins me over the most are the mistakes rather than the sought after quotations. So cupidibus is an hyperlatinization. The adjective would be cupidis, and we have a hypercharacterizing ablative. So the suffix ibus is just a pox, as we had seen with the M for cursem. And then the structure, as I said before, we have the evocatio and the praecatio. An exact parallel is to be found in the Evocationis Carmina. I found this reference in Apple. Macrobius shows us an Evocationis Carmen where the same verbs are used. And the addressee is that the second person. So teque, precor, venerorve, veniamque, avic speto, ut vos, and so on. And the same verb is there again used in the magical field, even in Antiquity. We have here the sorceress Dipsade in Ovid, performing an amatory spell, and Virgil, again the same verb, evoco. Wani is used in ancient prayer and then absorbed by ancient magic, because I do not have time to explain all the mechanisms behind ancient magic. But what's important is that ancient magic has a strong link with prayer, because the witch or the wizard is supposed to pray to the goddesses of the underworld, but also in a certain sense to defeat them. For example, we see that in Lucan with the sorceress Eritto, of which the gods themselves are afraid of. This is why I focused on ancient prayer too. So Wani is a request to the deity to present itself to the praying person, and this exact structure is to be found in ancient Greek prayer, testified by ancient Greek lyric poetry. This is what we have, with verbs such as the, bine, iku, mole, come. Isto is, I would say that it is a mistake, or better, or at least it is a late usage of Latin, where ist tends to replace hic, so the normal demonstrative pronoun of first person. So I've translated it as these, like hank. I don't think they appreciate any subtlety and any difference between them. Consuma is a typical verb for defictiones. I've chosen just an instance for that, an Augustan inscription in Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum. We see consumas. And in the end, lucem tenebrasque tuas, like Aterignis, another osimoric couplet, which sees this particular poetry, poem, I would say. And also, I didn't say that fusque fume is an alliterative and equisyllabic pair that has no other attestation in classical Latin. So I think this is a liberty of the mysterious poet behind these curves. So to summarize, the magical Latin that I found in Sabrina seems to be a linguistic pastiche with loanwords of poetic memory from Virgil, Ovid, also the Vulgata of the Bible. We didn't have time to see such instances, but there are many, because obviously the Latin is sometimes easier to be found from non-insiders, also non-academical people. Second, the language of ancient defictiones in the content, in the linguistic formulation and vocabulary. Third, stylistic features from ancient prayer, like the Dushtil theorized by Norden, but also relative clauses, variati with imperative clauses, and another. From L1 English to L2 Latin, which is the most original trait of this Latin, because on the other hand, we have different types of Latin. For example, in Barbary, another Netflix web series where we have the German used by the simpler and more regular and more correct Latin. I would like to conclude showing you this quotation of Nagel, the sorcery manual that I've shown you before, The Language of Magic, 1986, which explains why it is that Latin is even today the language of magic. So the advantage of reciting incantations and the like in a language completely alien to the one we are used to is great, for it lends a certain mysticism and a sense of detachment from the everyday world to the proceedings. All this increases the chances of success in the attempt to magically manipulate events. Thank you for your attention.